identify the hypothesis and conclusion of the following statement, and determine whether the statement is always, sometimes, or never true. And the statement here is the absolute value of x is greater than 0 for all real numbers x. Now, if I want to decide what the hypothesis and conclusion is here, it's usually a lot easier to figure them out if you rewrite this statement, this exact statement, as an if-then statement. So what this statement is saying is if x is a real number, then the absolute value of x is greater than 0. So let me rewrite that. If x is a real number, then the absolute value of x is greater than 0. These are equivalent statements. Now, when you write it like this, it's much easier to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. The hypothesis, you can view it as it's the if part of this proposition. So this right here is the hypothesis. X is a real number. That is the hypothesis. Hypothesis. And the conclusion is the then part. Sometimes it's called the consequent. It's this part right here. No, not, it's this part. X, absolute value of x is greater than 0. This is the conclusion, or the consequent. And over here, if you wanted to circle them, this is the conclusion. That is the conclusion. And the hypothesis is for all real numbers. It's a little bit easier to identify when you see it written like this. This is the hypothesis. Now, I don't want you get confused with the idea of a scientific hypothesis, which is related but a little bit different. A scientific hypothesis is an explanation for some phenomena that can be tested. So a scientific hypothesis might be something like saying blueberries, which I'm writing in blue intentionally, blueberries help reduce the risk of cancer. Reduce the risk of cancer. This right here is a scientific hypothesis. You could then go feed a bunch of people blueberries for a long period of time and see if they have a less likelihood of developing cancer than people who never got blueberries, and everything else is equal. And so it would be testable. You could see if it's true. And the conclusion would be whether this is true or not. But this is in the scientific hypothesis world, not to be confused with the notion of hypothesis we're using right now. Now, I don't want to confuse you too much, so I'm just going to leave this on the side here. But when you're in Algebra 1, and especially these are according to the California standards, a hypothesis in this context is the antecedent of this proposition, or it's the if part of this proposition. Now, the more interesting question is whether it is true. I mean, we can sit and label statements all day, but that's not interesting. The more fundamental thing is this a true statement? Is it true that if x is a real number, then the absolute value of x is greater than 0? Well, the one number that pops out of my mind that disproves this is if x is 0. 0 is a real number. 0 is a real number. That's true. But, and I'll write but in caps, but the absolute value of 0 is equal to 0. It's not greater than 0. So this disproves this statement. It's definitely not always true. It's definitely not always true. Now, if you pretty much have any other real number, this will be true. Because any other real number is some distance away from 0. That's what the absolute value measures. So if you took a 1 or a -1 or whatever, the absolute value of those are greater than 0. So this is sometimes true. This is sometimes true.